All right, I promised that I would share a customer story with contrast to give you an example of what I talked about in the blog. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, this is not my story. I wish it was, but it's not. But I want to point that out to you to begin with. But it is a true story, and it comes from a small engineering company that made laser precision technology for the auto industry. And they had had great success with one of the major manufacturers, and now they were trying to sell this solution to another company that they knew was experiencing the same problem. They were having a challenge getting a meeting because they were calling too low in the organization on engineers. They finally got a meeting with one of the chief operating executives of this plant that was a part of this manufacturer, and they received permission from their customer to share the story with their prospect. And the reason was that the division of the prospect that they were talking to was not in direct competition with the division of the customer that they had sold to. So the story goes something like this. You know, when we started working with our customer, they had some real challenges in their manufacturing of camshafts, and one of the challenges they had related to scrap. Because their manufacturing process wasn't as precise as it needed to be, they were running an 8% scrap level. Now what that meant was that when these camshafts came off the line, 8% of them weren't fit to go on into the engines, which meant they lost not only the raw materials, but all the time it took to produce those. Now what that led to was an inventory problem. Because of the fact that they had so much scrap, they had to carry a lot more inventory than you would normally expect that you would have to carry. They had to carry 24 hours worth of inventory. Now this created two problems. Number one, too much inventory to carry for a just-in-time manufacturing company. And number two, because of the size of their plant, they had to store all this excess inventory on the loading dock, which meant if a truck came in or a truck needed to go out, they had to move all of that excess inventory, all that excess stuff off the loading dock in order to take care of it. So they had to do triple the work, which was wreaking havoc on the people in the plant that were responsible for things like logistics. And what all this meant to them was they had a lot of engine failures. As a matter of fact, they were experiencing 60 engine failures per month. Now their policy was that if an engine failed, they would replace their camshaft at no charge to the customer. So this created a real challenge for them. Well, here's the good news. 6 months after working with us, they were able to make some dramatic improvements. Number one, they were able to take their scrap level from 8% down to 4%. And in doing so, they were able to reduce the amount of raw material that they had to keep on stock, such that their inventory level was able to go down to only 1 hour of inventory. Number one, that took care of a big financial problem, but it also took care of a logistics problem and made life so much simpler for the people in the plant because they didn't have to move stuff all over the place. But the really good news was that they were able to reduce their engine failures from 60 failures a month down to none. Now, if I just stopped the story right now, it would be a pretty compelling story. But we received permission to share the financials with you, and I want to make sure that you understand the financial impact of this improvement. By reducing their scrap, meaning they didn't have to carry as much inventory, everything got more efficient, they were able to save $360,000 a year. That led them to be able to reduce their inventory, which led to a savings of $40,000 per year, plus all of the benefits to the logistics folks that didn't have to be driving around like crazy, moving stuff all over the place. And of course, the really big savings came in the fact that they were able to reduce engine failures down to none, which resulted in a savings of $1.2 million per year. And that doesn't count all of the excess inventory that they had to buy. So if you do all the math, you'll get a savings of around $1.5 million per year. And they were able to accomplish that all for an initial investment of $275,000. Now, at the end of this presentation, the chief operating executive from the prospect stood up and said, "We had that exact problem at 2 of our facilities. We need to work together to get your solution installed there." That's an example of a customer story with contrast. And what makes it so powerful is obviously the metrics, which I talk about in the blog. Those are critical. You can't just talk about, we feel good, we like working with you. But it's also the contrast between the before and after. If I would have just told the story with just this information, without the metrics, if I would have said, they reduced this by 4%, they reduced this by this, they did this by this, it has impact. But when it really clicks with the decision-making part of your customer's brain is when they can see the contrast between the before and after. That's why it's so important to tell your story in that way. The other thing that was done with this story was contrast was created just between the different colors that were used in the flip chart or in the whiteboard. Now, my guess is you have stories like this all over the place in your company. What you have to do is you have to sit down and figure out what those stories are. Make sure those stories are told in the way that highlights what happened to the customer. Nothing really about what your company did, how cool your company's product is. It's all about the results that your customer gets. And when you tell this story in the moment, using contrast, using different colors, your customer is going to remember that story and it's going to make an impact, and it might result in a sale right then and there at that moment. Thanks for watching, and best of luck to you.